So I didn't have a specific topic planned for this week. I was going to make the project logistics video and just leave it at that. But when I arrived in Miami, I started thinking about shame. Specifically beginning with one character's very public and nude walk of shame in the season finale of Game of Thrones, but more focused on cyber harassment, speech, and privacy. And after a week of reading about this and writing about this, I don't have any answers to my questions. And I don't expect to have any answers for my question 4 weeks from now or even 40 years from now. That doesn't mean the questions aren't worth asking. There are 4 components to this video: shame, speech, privacy, and the internet. Now there's this tension between speech and privacy. So if privacy is black and speech is white, there's all this gray in the middle. Trying to understand where shame fits into this is adding a gradient to that gray between speech and privacy. Adding in the internet to this tension between speech and privacy, the gray of shame and the gray of shame is essentially a color bomb exploding on our scale. The tension between speech and privacy comes down to what parts of our lives are valid topics for public discourse. So if I tell you something in private, does your freedom of speech protect your right to go share those details of our conversation? What if I tell you I did something wrong in private? Or what if I don't even tell you and you just found out I did something wrong or something embarrassing in my private life? Can you then use public free speech to justify publicly sharing those details? Privacy should be respected, especially for private individuals. So what we say or do in private should not become a topic of public discourse. But when we think something is done in public, it's all right for this to be a valid topic of public discourse and protected by speech. But what's public and what's private? And even offline, this is a difficult question. What I'm talking about here is the difference between privacy and your private information. Privacy protects our reputation, your offline, public, short Wikipedia article, and your ability to participate in the public discourse. However, your private information can contribute to the public discourse. Example of this is Monica Lewinsky. Her private actions within her sex life contain public information about Bill Clinton, arguably the most, and rightfully so, most public figure at the time. So does violating your privacy to access that private information about Bill Clinton, is that justified by free speech? What ended up happening to Monica, in case you've been living under a rock for the past 20 years, was the destruction of her reputation. In her TED Talk called The Price of Shame this past year, she calls herself patient zero of losing a personal reputation on a global scale almost instantaneously from cyberbullying and online harassment. So I see this motive between cyber harassment and public shame being the same. The perpetrator is telling the victim, you have done something wrong. You have violated something that I believe in, and I'm going to punish you for it. I'm going to make an example of you for anyone else who may be guilty of this wrongdoing to prevent them from doing it in the future. Now, for public shame, that wrongdoing is a social norm. Now, what constitutes a social norm is a topic for another day. With cyber harassment, the perpetrator might see the wrongdoing to be a social norm, but it's also very much so a personal offense. Yes, Bill and Monica engaged in an extramarital affair, which is not necessarily illegal in every state, but we socially enforce monogamy, which we value, with public shame. But in the general case, not with the case that has including the former president, extramarital affairs are still private matters. So what happens when private information is the topic of public discourse? So monogamy is a topic of discourse, and private extramarital affairs violate that topic. Is it okay to use shame to harm the reputation of those actors in that public affair, in that private affair? Daniel Solow, a George Washington University law professor, wrote about how shame was previously confined to either your small town or large publications. So if you were shamed within your small town, everybody knew the action, but they also knew the context in which the action happened. So you were given the opportunity to redeem yourself. Or you were a public individual, so your life is not protected, your privacy is not protected to the extent as it is for a private individual. and your shame or your life matters enough for it to be published. Now online, you have anyone can be shamed and nobody knows the context. So you have no opportunity to redeem yourself. So your online reputation is then destroyed and you have no ability to participate in the online public discourse. Well, that's not okay. If a destroyed reputation results in silence, then we aren't protecting free speech. But there was a reason that you were shamed. You expressed an idea that violates our social norms, so we will counteract that expression with shame. Now, within this context, the shame is okay because it's counter speech, and it's just the marketplace of ideas at work. Well, then I circle back and I think, well, what happens if we're punishing some sort of private action? Does the theory of the competition of ideas still protect shame if it's based on privacy, if it violates privacy? Or even more so, what happens if we're shaming somebody because for violating a social norm that isn't universally accepted? To confuse you even more, let's add in the internet. In 2013, Justine Sacco tweeted, going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, just kidding, I'm white. Her tweet, which is dismissively and sarcastically racist, went viral and her reputation was destroyed. Now, taking a very simplistic view of race issues in the United States, race is not an acceptable social norm. So if you express racist beliefs or ideas, we will shame you. Now, we'll use the law to punish racist actions, which are instances of discrimination. But the law can't punish racist beliefs because we don't want to live in a totalitarian state. So we use shame as counter speech to racist speech. But was it okay to silence Sacco for her one racist tweet? No, I'm not condoning her words here. What I'm asking you to consider the context of her tweet, her small Twitter community, and the intention of it to be a poor joke. So I'm okay shaming the idea behind the tweet, but was it necessary to destroy Sacco's reputation and to not allow her to redeem herself? Or will her tweet forever live in isolation with no context? Is that why we're so outraged online? We see something just blatantly wrong, and we immediately have to condemn it without giving any thought to the context or the nuance of the words? Was it because Justine was a public figure? She had a public Twitter account, and her tweets were public. So does that justify this destruction of her reputation because she doesn't have, it's not private, it's public information? If that's the case, are we all public figures? So we can be shamed. So anything we say online is part of the public discourse, which we can be shamed for if it violates some social norm that may not be universally accepted. And we can be forced out of the public dialogue. And that's all okay because shame is, counter speech. I'm not sure if that satisfies me.